One of my daughters is extremely smart. I'm not saying my other daughter's dumb. I'm saying one is extremely smart, okay? Now figure this out. Now I'll give you an example. Like my daughter, one of my daughters is right reading level, right math level. Everything is right where it's supposed to be. But my other daughter is on some astronaut stuff, and I just figured it out when they were about 3 years old. We're in a restaurant. Both of my daughters said at the same time, "Daddy, we have to go to the bathroom." And I was like, this is horrible, because no dad want to have to take his daughters into no men's bathroom. So I'm like, look, don't nobody look at nothing. Don't nobody touch nothing. Matter of fact, don't even touch each other, because I don't know how this works, okay? So we get in the bathroom, and they use the bathroom. We walk out to the sink. They're washing their hands. And all of a sudden, my daughter, who's 3 years old, was trying to read the sign on the wall. And I was like, wow, she's trying to read the sign at the sink? She only 3 years old? I'm impressed. A couple minutes later, my daughter was like, "Daddy, why do employees have to wash their hands before returning to work?" I was like, what? I said, "You just read that?" She said, "Yes, sir." And I started tripping, because I'm like, maybe I can read at 3. I just only remember having to read in kindergarten. You understand what I'm saying? But nobody remembers being 3, you know what I mean? But I got another 3-year-old right beside her, another crash dummy right there. I'm like, "Hey, can you read that sign?" She said, "Yes, sir." I said, "What does it say?" She said, "Brown." I said, "Not the color. What's the word say?" She said, "White." I said, "You can't read that?" She's like, "I'm 3. I said, "That's what I thought. Don't touch her. She a mutant." That's exactly what I thought. Ever since that moment, man, my daughter has found a way to make me feel dumb every single year without even trying, right? Last year, my daughters wanted wristwatches for Christmas, right? So I was like, I got an idea. I'll pick them up one weekend. We'll go to the mall, go through the store, look at some watches. Then I know what to get, what not to get for Christmas, right? We get to the 3rd store. My daughter goes, "Oh." I said, "What's the problem?" She's like, "Where are the analog watches?" I said, "Who makes that?" She said, "Analog." I said, "What is that, Timex, Rolex, Hublot? Who makes that?" She said, "Analog, Daddy." I was like, "What are you talking about?" She said, "These are digital." I was like, "And?" She's like, "The other watch, long hand, short hand." I said, "Who told you that?" She's like, "That's what we learned in school." I said, "That's wrong." She said, "What's it called?" I said, "It's called a regular watch." She's like, "It's not." I said, "It is." I called my ex-wife on the phone. I said, "Hey, the watch with just the numbers on it, what's that called?" She said, "Digital." I said, "The one with the long hand and short hand?" I said, "What's that called?" She's like, "A regular watch." I said, "That's what I thought." I just wanted to make sure 2 dumb parents can make a smart kid is what I was trying to figure out. You know? Now, with twins, everything is a competition. You know, everything's competitive. And my other daughter's tired of hearing how smart her sister is. She wanted to get some praise. So one day my daughter comes in and goes, "Daddy, guess what the teacher said?" I said, "What did the teacher say?" She said, "The teacher said I have the neatest handwriting in the whole grade." I said, "The whole grade?" She said, "The whole grade." I said, "Write something for me." She wrote something. I made a big deal about it. I said, "Wow, that's beautiful. I never seen somebody your age write that neat before. That's absolutely amazing." Her sister goes, "Puh." I said, "What's the problem?" She's like, her tittles aren't even in the right position. I said, "Her what?" She said, "Her tittles." I was like, "What's that?" She said, "That's the dot over top of the lowercase I." I said, "Oh, you just making stuff up now." She's like, "Look it up." I go on my phone, I'm looking it up. But as I'm looking it up, I'm telling her, "Hey, here's a situation. You could have happily been happy for your sister and just gave her some praise instead of trying to be a jerk and trying to make her feel bad about herself." I was like, and I'm looking this information up and I'm reading the definition, and you owe her an apology because that's not what it means. She said, "You spelled it incorrectly." I said, "You better get out my face before I put a tittle over your eyes." You know?